Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We are live from Books and Books right here in Coral Gables, Florida. Just a reminder to our internet audience, for those of you watching, you can give us a call at any time during the presentation this evening and order a copy of tonight's book. We'll get it autographed for you and we'll ship it to you free of charge anywhere in the United States. For those of you that are here, please don't forget to silence your cell phones and don't forget to pick up a copy of our Books and Books newsletter on your way out this evening as you're picking up your copy of James's book. You can also visit us on booksandbooks.com. You can give us your email address. That way we can give you emails to everything that's going on here so you don't miss a thing. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Tonight we're very happy to have with us James Grissom and Follies of God, Tennessee Williams, and the Women of the Fog. At a moment in the life of Tennessee Williams when he felt he had been relegated to a lower artery of the theatrical heart, when critics were proclaiming that his work had been overrated, he summoned to New Orleans a hopeful 20-year-old writer, James Grissom, who had recently written an unsolicited letter to the great playwright asking for advice. After a long, intense conversation, Williams sent Grissom on a journey on the playwright's behalf to find out if he, Tennessee Williams, or his work had mattered to those who had so deeply mattered to him, those who had led him to what he called the blank page or the pale judgment. Among the more than 70 giants of American theater and film Grissom sought out, chief among them was the women who came to Williams out of the fog, Lillian Gish, Maureen Stapleton, Jessica Tandy, who said, "The moment I read Portrait of a Madonna, my life began. I was, for the first time, unafraid to be ruthless in order to get something I wanted." Others included Kim Stanley, Bette Davis, Katherine Hepburn, Jo Van Fleet, Rosemary Harris, and the men who mattered and helped with his creations, including Elia Kazan, Jose Quintero, Marlon Brando, and John Gielgud, fill this remarkable book that magically makes clear how Tennessee Williams wrote, how he came to his visions of Amanda Wingfield, his Blanche Dubois, Stella Kowalski, Alma Weinmiller, Lady Torrance, and the other characters of his plays that transformed the American theater of the mid-20th century. James Grissom studied at Louisiana State University and the University of Pennsylvania. He's written for HBO, Showtime, CBS, and NBC. He lives in New York. Please give him a warm welcome, Mr. James Grissom.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I just finished my first week of book tours and the voice is gone. I started in Woodstock, which I recommend to you if you haven't been to Woodstock. Anyway, I flew in, my plane got in about 47 minutes ago. And I don't have my luggage. I would have dressed better for you, I promise. So I'm in my flying clothes. I fell asleep on a Latin man. And then I went to the Biltmore, which is a cross between Sweet Bird of Youth and Sunset Boulevard. I am Tennessee Williams material. The introduction had a little bit about I was known in my family and among my friends for writing letters to everybody. I wrote letters to Joan Crawford. I wrote letters to Betty Davis. I wanted desperately to get out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I had studied acting for a short time, and then I realized I didn't want to do that. So I thought, well, I'll write for the theater or for films. And a wonderful teacher I had at Juilliard, Marion Seldes, who sadly passed away in October, and who was a great champion of mine, she said, well, you have a gift for walking up to people and getting what you want. So why don't you write letters to the writers who matter? So I wrote a letter to Tennessee Williams. For reasons I'm not really sure about, I included 2 short stories and a picture of me winning a high school beauty pageant. Because in the Deep South, men entered beauty pageants too. So I enclosed that, and about 4.5 months later he called. And I had never told my mother or my father that I was writing letters to these people. So when my mother came to my room and said, someone claiming to be Tennessee Williams is on the phone, I knew it had to be him. And so he said, he said, I think you can be of help to me. And then he said, let's have lunch. And I said, where are you? And he says, I'm at the Royal Orleans. And I said, well, I'm 80 miles away. And he said, well, you better hurry. So I got in my car and I sped down the I-10 to New Orleans, fully expecting him to not be there, but he was. He asked me to meet him in Jackson Square. I was looking everywhere, I didn't see him. And suddenly I heard his voice, and I turned, and he was wearing this full-length raccoon coat and sunglasses. And we went to the Court of Two Sisters restaurant. I don't know what I was really expecting. I thought I would have maybe 2 hours with him and that he would give me advice on how to write, how to be truthful, what to do with what you'd written once you had. And instead he asked me to help him. He said, biographies are being written weekly that say that I never mattered, that I was overrated, that I never had any talent. One critic wrote, "Let us charitably assume that Tennessee Williams died in 1962, the last time he wrote anything of consequence." Another writer actually published an obituary in Time magazine with a black border. I mean, it was an editorial, he was paid for it, but it was in the style of an obituary. So he said, "I can't be a very good friend to people, I can't make a meal, I can never raise a child, but I really thought I could write." So here's what I do to keep from being bitter. I focus on those people who mattered to me and who make me get up every morning and face the pale judgment, that blank page. But will you do me a favor? Will you go to these people and ask if I ever mattered to them? And I thought, I'm 20 years old. I thought, well, okay, I'm not. It's better than going to LSU. I mean, all right, I'll do it. So he took the menu and handed it to me and started dictating names, and I started writing them down. And it got to be confusing. It was taking up too much space, and he kept trying to put them in a priority. And he said, "I have a better idea. Let's go to Louis' Place." And I thought Louis' Place was another restaurant or a jazz club, but it was St. Louis Cathedral, where he had begun his conversion to Catholicism in 1969. And he went into a small little alcove where they sold gifts and things. And he started just pulling rosaries out of bins. And I'm a Southern Baptist. I didn't even know what these things were, but he was pulling all these things out, and the woman in the shop was apoplectic. She was like a little Cloris Leachman type. And, "May I help you? May I help you?" He just kept ignoring her. And he finally said, "Oh, I found the rosary. I found the perfect rosary." He handed it to me, and I just held it like a snake or something. I didn't know what it was. And we went into the cathedral, but first we stopped and he lit a candle. And he said, "This is a candle for Maureen Stapleton." Okay, I mean, I didn't know what the direction of the day was. So then we get into the cathedral and he starts naming the beads on the rosary for women. He says, he got it all wrong, by the way, but I didn't know that. He said the rosary is divided by 3 sets of mysteries. They're the miserable mysteries, the happy mysteries, and the fabulous mysteries. That's how he remembered it. And he wanted the women to be in a certain order, but he gave the first bead to Lillian Gish, then he went to Katherine Hepburn, then he went to Maureen Stapleton, and then he would start editing and back up, and this went on. And everyone is looking at us like we're crazy. But he finally wrote a poem to Maureen Stapleton. And what he finally said to me was, I think I have a section here I'll read to you. He asked me to be his witness. He said, "We all need a witness. And here is the importance of bearing witness. We do not grow alone. Talents do not prosper in a hothouse of ambition and neglect and hungry anger. Love does not arrive by horseback or prayer or good intentions. We need the eyes, the arms, and the witness of others to grow, to know that we have existed, that we have mattered, that we have made our mark. And each of us has a distinct mark that colors our surroundings, that flavors the recipe of experience in which we find ourselves. But we remain blind and without identity until someone witnesses us." So he then proceeded to talk to me. It turned out to be 5 days. I thought I was going there for lunch. I drove home twice to Baton Rouge. The last 2 days was just 24 hours. And he told me all about these incredible women. And people ask a lot, as well they should, what he saw in me. And I think it was that he couldn't believe that a 20-year-old knew all these people, because I had such an interest in the theater and in film. So when he mentioned Catherine Cornell, I knew about whom he was talking. I knew Lillian Gish's work. I knew John Gielgud. I knew who these people were. But also we were incredible mimics. And when he would talk about Geraldine Page, he would talk like Geraldine Page, or Maureen Stapleton and so forth. And we just had so much fun talking. And he was also incredibly funny, which surprised me, because while I saw some humor in his plays, I think we think of Tennessee Williams as somewhat tragic and dramatic. He was hysterically funny. And he just gave me so much, and he gave me definitions of things that, no, that's not me. The title I want to explain to you. He would say, she's a great folly. You know, oh, Jessica Tandy, a fabulous, ladylike folly. I go, okay, what are we talking about? He said, well, I think that when God created Earth, he created man and mud, you know, the utilities that we needed to just get by and get along. But he saw that something was lacking, and so he created woman, who could bring color and curiosity and light and music, and it's like the Follies of God. It was like a chorus line of women came into the earth. The subtitle, The Women of the Fog, that has to do with the fact that when Tennessee was very young, for reasons he didn't understand, although I think it had to do with the fact that he would retreat to his room. His father really did not like him and was very abusive toward him. And Tennessee would retreat to his bedroom with a radio. And he described it as this very large cathedral-looking wooden radio that he polished with lemon oil, and he loved it. And he would hold it close to him. And so that it felt like the radio, the vibes and the bass and the sounds were going into his body. And he'd listen to ballroom presentations, radio dramas, anything he could find. And when his father punished him, he would take away the radio. And so Tennessee would open the window and eavesdrop on the neighbors. And he said, I think that's when I became a writer, because I was listening to the arguments of the Millers next door or the Bankstons down the street and so forth. And so he was in the dark when he did all this. And so when he would begin to write, he would close his eyes. He would imagine a proscenium stage. And for reasons he cannot figure out, or could never figure out, there was fog on the stage when the curtain rose. And out of this fog appeared the figure of a woman. And she began talking, and Tennessee just followed her wherever she went. So that's what he means by the women of the fog. They came out of that. He told this to everyone with whom he worked. Only one person, Elia Kazan, honored this. And if you go back and rewatch A Streetcar Named Desire, the film, which everyone should every once in a while, Vivien Leigh appears out of so much fog. Did I just go dead? Oh. She appears out of this incredible fog, which would take about 25 buses in New Orleans to create that much fog. But that was, I'm going to wait and see what's happening.
She'll have to be louder.
I'll be louder. Okay, tell me if you can hear me. That was how Elia Kazan honored that analogy of the fog. So Vivien Leigh walks out of this fog, and that's the first time you see her. So he no longer could close his eyes and have any fog on the stage. So he was doing something he called faking the fog, which was to sit through movies 3 times, watch television, waiting for a woman's voice. He said there was a note. Tennessee was also writing notes constantly. I think he was thinking of writing another book, an autobiographical book. He writes, there is a place to which I once had... Ooh, that wasn't me. There is a place to which I once had swift and easy access. This is not a geographical location, but a psychic one, I suppose. It swirls with memory and a generous, if not always healthy need to share these memories. I do not understand how I came to possess so much extraneous thought and fear, but it drags me away from this place to which I would like to return. And I saw this note, and I said, what is this place that you want to return? And he says, I want to return home. He kept talking about home, and so I said, well, what do you consider home? Columbus, Mississippi, Clarksdale, Mississippi, St. Louis, New Orleans? He said he had a definition of home. He said everyone was trying to get home, but what he said was, he liked to quote an Italian poet named Cesare Pavese, whose great quote was, the only joy in the world is to begin. And when Tennessee met me, it was September. People were going back to school, getting new notebooks, making all these pledges, they're going to be good students, they're going to study harder. And Tennessee was trying to do the same thing in his life. He was trying to say, I'm going to sober up, I'm going to clean up, I'm going to get back to work. And he said, I'm going to get back to that place that's safe. And he said, One day it will happen, a place that is safe and strong and right for the fog. All of us are seeking a home, and I don't mean where we were born or where we now live and have things, but where we can do the big things, the right things, where we belong, where we fit, where we're loved. And he really believed that that home was wherever that happened for us. And he said, I'll travel the globe if I have to, but I will find the place where I can sit in front of the pale judgment and feel at home and work again. And so he kept saying to me, get me home. So in the writing of the book, I didn't go there, I hasten to add, I didn't go there as a writer. But again, I would send the notes to Marion Seldes, and she would say, you've got to do something with these incredible quotes you have from him. I mean, they're extraordinary. But I didn't know what. And when I moved to New York in 1989, Marion Seldes and I had lunch, and she had with her a large tote bag, and she pulled the tote bag out and poured all these letters I had sent her for the previous 7 years on the table and said, this is a book. You have to do it. What can I do to help you? And so she began making phone calls, and then the telephone in my apartment began, hello, this is John Gielgud. Hello, this is Irene Worth. Hello, this is Alec Guinness. Katherine Hepburn. I mean, all these people who loved her so much and loved Tennessee so much that they said, we're going to take a risk on this kid. And for the longest time, I had no idea what I had. And then suddenly, it was all here, and there was all this material. And my goal was always to be a witness to him and to all these great women, and to get him home. When we were together, he said, you're only 20 and you're very angry. Very angry. I said, I was 20 years old, and he said, you're only 20. He dropped his T's. And you're very angry. Oh, okay. He says, it's not good. He said, you have to remember that every day we're shoulder to shoulder with people who all have a story they want to tell, and they just want to get home safely. And okay. He said, remember, all we have is memory. That's all we have. And we share it with our children. We share it when we write, when we act, when we paint, when we live. I mean, as we're walking among each other. They can take everything away from us but our memory. And he said, I think memory is a living organism. I think it has a blood system, and what that blood is love. So I said, being 20 and insouciant, I said, well, what about when you're really angry with people? When you're angry and you have a grudge? He goes, that's not memory. Well, if you're harboring this anger and this grudge for an act, what is it if it's not a memory? He goes, it's insanity. So he was very much about, he did not hold grudges. He was only angry at himself. He admitted he had destroyed himself and had made himself incapable of writing, but he was going to do his damnedest to get it back. He had a great sense of humor. He was one of the few playwrights, major playwrights, who would waive his royalty fees when a college or a high school wanted to do his plays, or regional theater. He thought it was hysterical when pornographic films were made, making plays on his titles. He thought it was hysterical. But he was desperate to begin writing again, and that didn't happen. I mean, he wrote every day, but not to his satisfaction. And so that's the journey that I took, and I met all these incredible, incredible people. So, any questions or comments? Yes, hi.
When did you encounter him? I'm not looking for your age.
Oh no, I don't know, I have no problem with that. I was 20 years old, and it was 1982. Yeah.
And when did he die?
He died 5 months after we met.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that was part of the guilt that I had, because he called me several times at home in Baton Rouge saying, well, when are we going to do this? When are we going to start this project? And I didn't know what to do, but I was also afraid, because he had like a fishing tackle box of pills and drank. And when I was in New Orleans, I was always pretty close to my car, and I could get away. And I thought, if I went up to New York, he said, well, I have places where you can stay. But I thought, I'm not ready for that. And then when he died, I felt horribly guilty. And my father, who had no interest at all, well, a minor interest in theater, he knew who Tennessee Williams was, but he was one of those staunch people who said to me, you have to honor this request. You know, someone can't ask you to do something for them and you not do it. And so he like really pushed me and was the one who made it possible for me to move to New York and start this, you know, knocking on doors. And I'm amazed that 99.9% of the women answered the door, you know, and he bought gifts for them. He also called Marion Seldes after we met because I had met her earlier because I had auditioned for Juilliard where she taught, and she had become a mentor to me. So when and he was like, what? You're this 20-year-old Rue city for walking up to people and getting what you need. So he called Marion Seldes and said, I met with him, what do you think of him? And she vouched for me. So then I came up and he had spoken in a kind of code to me so that when I sat down, for instance, with Julie Harris or Jessica Tandy or Kim Stanley, I knew things I could never have known. You know, so it was like it was his way of clearing it for me. Like, this is not just someone knocking on the door and, you know, making up a story. You know, I had information that I could never have known, unless I was a trance channeler or something, but, which a couple of people have accused me of being. But, so that's when I started. But I moved to New York in '89, when I was about 27 or 28, yeah. So, any other questions? Oh, hi.
But these women didn't know that he had actually sent you by now?
Only Maureen Stapleton and Marion Seldes knew. He had spoken to them during the time he was with me. The others had no idea. And here I show up with an IBM Selectric. I mean, this is a little pre-computer and pre-internet. And I would call all over the place to get their addresses, or I'd call Marion, and she'd say, well, I know how to get in touch with them. And here I tell this story I'm telling you, and they're like, okay. But then when they would read what he'd written, then they all responded and said, okay.
So this was an introductory letter that you had at some point.
Sometimes I would load it with a lot of information. Sometimes, and then I thought, well, maybe that's just coming on too strong. Or I just write a letter saying, you don't know me, but I met with Tennessee Williams, and this is what he said about you. And sometimes they'd ask for more. They'd say, well, what did he say? They're very competitive, you know. Well, what did he say about other people? So I'd send that. But most of the time, thanks to Marion. And then it's amazing, with each actress I interviewed, they kind of joined the chorus, saying, oh, I met with him, he's great. We have to help him. And then they were prodding me for years to finish the damn thing, you know. So they kind of joined in and were very supportive.
Since you met them in person, you would meet them in
The only,
person, or you would have all over the phone?
all were in person. Marlon Brando was by phone. Eva Le Gallienne was by phone. John Gielgud and Alec Guinness were by phone. All the rest were in person. Yeah. Hi.
What did some of these women, these people say?
There were a lot of, like Katherine Hepburn, who was one of the most fabulous and intimidating of people, was not someone I thought of as emotional, and I made her cry, and she rushed me out of the house. And I thought I'd blown it. But she sent me this very sweet letter, which is reproduced in the book.
Did you talk about Spencer?
We didn't, no.
Was she offended?
Was she offended? No. But what Tennessee wrote about her, and it was typed, and I had copied it. He was going to write a book of profiles. I'll tell you something, Tennessee was clearly emulating Truman Capote, who did music for Chameleons and all these profiles, because there were all these jagged little pieces of profiles on Katherine Hepburn and movie stars and so forth. And I think he was trying to do a book like that. And Music for Chameleons had been dedicated to him. And he said, well, I'll write the same kind of book. She wasn't offended, she was very moved, and I think that was tough for her. And she cried in front of me, and I thought, well, what do I do with this? But she was like a great, and then she invited me back. She didn't like to be taped, which was fine with me, because I just wrote everything really fast. I also showed everybody what I wrote, which my editor's office is next door to Carl Bernstein's editor. And Carl Bernstein is someone I've waited on in many stores in which I've worked in New York, the Metropolitan Museum, La Maison du Chocolat. He's like, Why are you doing it? I'm not supporting myself with writing. I don't have a TV show right now. And he kept asking to see samples, and he'd say, how do you get such great quotes? And I go, well, I kind of wear them down. I mean, I think most of the people I interviewed in person, there might have been 12 visits. Go back and forth and back and forth. And the way you earn 12 visits is you show them what you edited themselves. Because Carl Bernstein said, you can't do that. They're gonna edit themselves. And I go, you've been covering politicians too long. Yeah, I mean, he was like writing the Hillary Clinton book at that time. And I said, I can see where Hillary Clinton would be given a transcript and go, strike that, rewrite that. But all they ever did was expand on what they had said. So even if they said something negative and scandalous, they kept that in, but they added more to it to explain why they felt that way. So that's how I got all the great quotes. Hi. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Hi.
You've got to be terribly engaging. That's terrific.
I can be. I don't know. I don't know.
I think the elderly ladies are also very kind. If they're not mean, they want to give their last chance and give everybody.
Well, I don't know how successful I would have been if I had just been someone walking in who had never seen Tennessee Williams and say, I'm writing a biography of Tennessee Williams. But I had access to it, yes.
Question.
Yeah.
What was Marlon Brando like to interview?
The way Marlon Brando came to me, I was good friends with an actress of his who, I'm sorry to say, no one knows anymore, Barbara Baxley. Does anyone remember Barbara Baxley? You do? Yeah. Okay. Terrific actress. Best known for Nashville. She was Henry Gibson's wife, Lady Pearl. She was also Sally Field's mother and Norma Ray, but she was a terrific stage actress. Very opinionated, tough. And she was a friend of Marlon's, and when I was talking to her in like late 89, early 90, she said, Marlon's got to talk to you, and I'm going to call him, I'm going to tell him he has to. And then I'd see her and she'd go, he's not going to do it. Oh, okay. Well, then she died. She died suddenly of a heart attack in early June, and all of a sudden, and Dave and Oli Brubeck and I put together her memorial service at Sardi's, and we invited him, not knowing he wouldn't come. But at about 2 in the morning, my phone rang, and it was Marlon Brando. And one of the first things he said to me was, I just need someone to talk to. His son was on trial for murder. He had just signed a huge contract for his autobiography, and he said, I don't know how to do this. I don't want to be too honest. I don't know what to do. And all of a sudden, it's like 3 hours passed. And he just would call me every 2 or 3 days and talk about everybody and everything, religion and so forth. He said, we are such a corrosive society. It's like you have to either be Protestant or Catholic. You have to be, black or white. You have to like ABC or CBS. You have to like the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Miami Dolphins. You have to like, he goes, and we just tear ourselves apart. And I would just write it all down and mail it to him on Mulholland Drive. And then he would call and say, okay, paragraph 3, it was this incredible voice. A paragraph, and he would add all these things to it. And that's my next book. There's very little of Marlon Brando in here, except when he's talking about how much he loves Maureen Stapleton. But the next book is about Brando, because then when I would talk to other people, they always ask, oh, who else have you spoken to lately? And when Marlon Brando's name comes up, they go completely apeshit. There's no other word for it. Like someone like Martha Graham or Agnes DeMille, they go, oh, that pig. Not because he's fat, because he destroyed his talent, and because he, waved, Katherine Hepburn said he used his talent like a whore at a frat party. And other people would say he's why I went to the theater. He revolutionized acting, so forth. So then I had all that material. When I first turned this book in, it was 900 pages. And my editor, Victoria Wilson, who's brilliant and very tough, she said, I love this. This book borders on greatness, but I don't publish Russian novels. So we cut it, and then there comes a new book. So I'm sorry, you've been so patient. Someone had, yes.
That's right. 2 questions, really. Did he have much control over the actresses that were finally retained for the parts?
He always had control. But Tennessee, you always said to me, he says, I am terribly disingenuous when I'm being flattered. So when a movie like Boom is being made, or when, toward the end of his life, Anne Margaret decides to do Blanche Dubois, his comment was, for what she's paying me, she can play Stanley. So like Boom was the film version of Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore. Richard Burton, it's like, who control? But he almost always did, he was too polite. He said to me, I thought, it sounds like an Eisenhower, when President Eisenhower spoke about the military-industrial complex, Tennessee said that we suffered from something just as pernicious. We have a Southern homosexual complex, which is that interior monologue goes, are they kidding me? But we go, that'd be fine, And then we just kind of drink and sulk, but it's wonderful. So he did. And to answer to your question, he did have control, but he didn't exercise it as fervently or as powerfully as he should have.
Did he ever make comments to you about Paul Newman?
He loved Paul Newman. I think he called him a panther with good intentions. That he was very ambitious. And I met Paul and Joanne, and it's true. He's very ambitious, wants what he wants, goes after it, and then feels so guilty. Have you all had dogs? When the dog eats the food, the dog shouldn't, and they have that guilty thing. That's how Tennessee described him.
He was Jewish, that's why.
Exactly.
My husband says he's half Jewish.
Oh, half?
He is half Jewish.
Tennessee would say which half, but he was just terrific in that way. Paul Newman, like Elizabeth Taylor, who converted to Judaism, and I'll tell you some Elizabeth Taylor, as Tennessee called them, fabulous Jew stories about Elizabeth Taylor. They either were born with or developed an incredible guilt about all they'd been given and all they had earned. I mean, they were born beautiful and possessing something that has value. And then they made a lot of money off of it. And then they spent their lives trying to get rid of it. And Tennessee was fascinated by this. Because long before there was Newman's Own, Paul Newman was just giving money to everybody. He kept the Actors Studio afloat, flew them over to London for that disastrous Three Sisters production. He paid for all that. But he loved Paul Newman. He also told me a sweet story about Paul Newman. When Paul Newman was in Sweet Bird of Youth, he was riding around New York on a motorcycle. He was very, sexy, hot guy. When he gave a good performance, or what he thought was a good performance, he walked right past the autograph seekers, like, I'm so please leave me alone. But when he thought it was bad, he would hang out for hours. Like he needed, to, get that back. But Elizabeth Taylor converted to Judaism, and Tennessee Williams was always, he says, I always nibble at the religious buffet. He studied everything, Christian Science, bring it on. They do things for a very short time and go, I don't get this. But he studied Judaism, and who did he know who was the most famous convert? Elizabeth Taylor. So she gave him books. She spent a fortune on all of these books. I think they're like 12, all these scholarly books. So that Tennessee said, I am the only Protestant-born person who knows why the Mishnah omitted the goats, which I have no idea what that means. Someone will have to look that up. I told to a rabbi once. He cracked up, so it means something. But he went back to Elizabeth and he said, "There's no drama in it." And she went, "What?" She goes, "There's no drama in it. I mean, you're all going to heaven. You're all great, type religion with characters coming in and characters coming and go." Tennessee, here's what you need to know about Judaism and what got conversion. Wouldn't you have loved to have been the rabbi converting Elizabeth Taylor? In the process of converting, she went to a celebration for a new child, newborn, and they were all in a room, and the child was passed from one person to another, and you are now responsible for this child, and they all held it. And there was this. She was just overwhelmed by this feeling of love and responsibility for this child, and she said, and I decided to take that as the way I lived my life. And when I met Elizabeth Taylor, she said, and when the AIDS crisis came, that was the baby that was handed to me. So Tennessee loved an actress named Miriam Hopkins, whom no one remembers anymore, but she was a wonderful actress. I think she's now known as just being a bitch who fought with Betty Davis. She was a good Southern-born, beautiful woman. And once when Tennessee was broke, he had to hock his typewriter, which was like an amputation. He couldn't write. He had about $3. He had a hole in his shoe and a hole in his heart, as he told me, and a shiny, seeded pair of pants. But he called her and said, could we have lunch? And the goal was he was going to ask if she could loan him some money. And he goes, how do you do that? It's the worst. It's just... She said, absolutely. chose a fashionable Upper East Side restaurant. She was waiting on the sidewalk. He walks up in his pitiful clothes, smiling shyly, and she's waving, and so beautiful. And he said this many times, he goes, God really appears quickly. Right as he got to her, he tripped on the sidewalk, fell toward her. She caught him. They were face to face, and he went, can you give me $500? And she said yes. And that bought him 7 months, so early 40s, $500. And she said, it is not a loan, it is a gift. So he said to me, I will hear no bad things about Miriam Hopkins. And he said, when you're out on this journey for me, the canary in my coal mine of need, don't let anyone say bad things about anyone that you've met and that you like. And the other day I was at a reading, and I mentioned the name Elizabeth Taylor, and someone right about over there went, oh, that whore. And so I went, excuse me. I just stopped the entire reading, and I said, where's that coming from? Oh, she only got married all the time, and she loved her jewels. Tennessee even said she put the Jew in jewelry. But yeah, that's all she was. She was stupid, and I went, okay, let me tell you something. When I met Elizabeth Taylor, I went several places with her. She got all judged up, as she called it. Jewels, makeup, everything, and went into hospitals, into clinics, horrible, underfunded hospitals in Queens and the Bronx, and walked in and was with all of these men and women who were dying. This was like early 90s. That's when it meant you're out. Their families had abandoned them. They had no insurance. They had nothing. And she was with them and talked to them and was funny and bawdy, told funny jokes and everything. Took her dog in there named Sugar. And Elizabeth Taylor and I walked in with our cans of Tab because we were addicted to Tab. She said, I think you are part Jewish. So anyway, but over the course of the years, I went to an AIDS conference because Elizabeth introduced me to all these people to whom she gave millions and millions of dollars. And a doctor came over to me and said, do you know that in the late 80s, Elizabeth Taylor was the only person, and I include myself, my cowardly, guilty self, we all got into hazmat suits when we went into AIDS wards. The doctors would come over and say, oh, you got to cover up. And we walked in looking like astronauts. And Elizabeth said, oh, I'm not doing that. And they said, well, you have to. I'm not doing it. They need skin. They need to be touched. They need to be held. So they brought over all these legal releases, and they said, well, you need to sign this because we can't guarantee that you won't contract anything. And the doctor said, and she did, she had a great signature. I mean, it was just big. It was exactly what Elizabeth Taylor's signature should look like. So she signed it, and she said, let me tell you something. I'd rather die doing the right thing than live being a shit. So that's why I always say, I will not hear bad things about Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, there are still books written about her that are critical. And she would make fun of herself. One time I went over, Marianne Williamson was there, who wrote A Course in Miracles. And when she left, she said, I know that God has given me everything I need. I know that, God is looking out for me, but I also know that jewelry makes me feel better, But she also would go to someone like Irene Diamond, who said, we do not have enough money for this wing. And she took a ring off and said, here, sell this. So, I mean, she was terrific. Hi.
Was she really a scholar of Judaism? I had always assumed that she just
I wouldn't say.
converted for Eddie Fisher or something.
No, Mike Todd, yeah. No, I wouldn't call her a scholar. I think she was very emotional and intuitive.
She said she gave you all these
No, she gave Tennessee.
I mean, she gave him
Yeah.
all these books.
Yeah, I think she read them and she got from it what she wanted. But she was also someone who said to me once that she considered herself a Judeo-Christian scientist. She took a lot of Judaism, but she also had a lot of, because her mother was a Christian scientist and she grew up with that. So.
And so why did Tennessee convert to Catholicism? Was it a serious conversion?
Well, he never could get the Rosary right. It was that September thing of starting over. It was like, and he liked the order and the rigidity of it. He referred to Episcopalianism as Catholic light. All the ritual, half the guilt. So he wanted the full-fledged thing. Yeah, exactly. Any other questions? Comments? Hi.
Well, when you convert, you are taught a religion, and you become more religious
Yes.
than those who practice it.
Exactly.
Because
But-
when you practice it, you're just born into it,
Yeah.
and you go to school, and that's it.
Yeah.
When you convert, you make a decision that you want to do this, and you are more of a scholar,
Exactly.
than someone who just.
But Truman,
Or believer.
but Tennessee was a little different than most people. He
I'm
became.
talking about Tennessee. I'm talking about Elizabeth.
Oh, but when Tennessee converted, he became fervent, but he also crafted it in his own image, and made it work for him. And whenever I talk to a Jesuit, they go, I think what he did with the Rosary was beautiful, because that's the whole point, is to focus. I mean, and these women had godlike qualities, as Tennessee would be the first to say. I mean, Maureen Stapleton was a bawdy saint. I mean, she was another one who was just terrific. I mean, she was incredible, and was such a good friend to him, but also profane, and drunk most of the time. But yeah, but he converted to his own form of Catholicism, and he would tell me, like, ignore this, ignore that, do this, do that, which they don't teach you in conversion classes. But I like his form of Catholicism. I'm doing an article now for a magazine explaining his tenets, Tennessee Catholicism. So
Tenets of Tennessee.
exactly.
What
Yeah.
magazine?
I don't know yet. My agent is submitting it to 3, so we'll see what happens. I'm sorry. One is the New Yorker, one's the Atlantic. Yeah.
Do you know Frank Rose?
Frank Rose?
Yeah.
No.
He lives in the West Village.
Oh, okay.
He's a writer for all the magazines.
Oh, okay. I'll look him up. I don't know him. Yeah. Do you have a question, sir? Yeah.
I just want to put in, the way I think of Tennessee Williams always
Yeah.
is the guy who writes plays which bring out, really challenge actresses.
Yeah.
You see this bias, which is mostly males that you see.
Yeah.
Perhaps not so much on the stage, but on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
He does for actresses what Shakespeare did for the men. They
Yeah.
all want to be Hamlet and Othello. And so on.
Exactly.
The question that came up is how many of these plays, I'm thinking particularly when they were adapted into film and you're stuck with the same actress rather than saying, when a play is produced, you may have 1,000 people
Yeah.
playing the same role. But you identify it once in the movie.
Yeah.
I'm thinking particularly about Streetcar Named Desire.
Exactly.
That was Jessica Tandy's part.
Yeah.
Everybody else in the play duplicated their role in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And yet
No,
here's
not
Vivian
Streetcar.
Lee
Yeah,
playing Blanche Dubois.
Well, and he did not want Jessica Tandy.
He did not want
And that's in the chat. He couldn't see her in it. Once he met her and saw her, Hume Cronin was very savvy, her husband, who had money. He produced a production of Portrait of a Madonna, which is a one-act play that is Streetcar, as Tennessee put it, in postulant mode. It's like kind of getting there. And he saw it and went, oh my God, she can do it. He thought she was a very stilted British actress, and she'd been in costume films and not very, okay, but he wanted Lillian Gish. He wrote it for Lillian Gish. But she pissed him off because she was just so violently positive that she said, this woman's an idiot. Why can't she just get a job and get on with her life? So he went, so Elia Kazan went, she's never going to get it. She's never going to get it. So they bumped her away. She held no grudges, because Lillian Gish doesn't hold grudges. The reason they went for Vivian Lee is they didn't think Jessica Tandy, A, had any name value for a big Warner Brothers film. And secondly, Elia Kazan said, I never believed, as wonderful as Jessie was, I never believed that she had been capable of seducing men at the motel to get rent money for Belle Reve. Never. I could believe she was a school teacher. He then said, I could never believe Vivian Lee had ever been a school teacher. But I could believe that she could still seduce men. Dim the lights, put some cardboard over the bulb, and hello, and still get men interested in her. And Vivian Lee was a star, even though she only appeared sporadically in films. She was a big star. But Jack Warner fought Kazan. You know who he wanted? Does anyone know who Jack Warner and Charles Feldman wanted more than Vivian Lee for Blanche Dubois? Olivia de Havilland. And she came in and read, and Tennessee said she was very good.
That's sort of a brilliant.
Yeah. Hi.
Vivian Lee played the part of Blanche Dubois in London.
Yes. Well, she did, but Kazan never warmed up to her. I mean, I think she had a private coach in Laurence Olivier, and Kazan resented that thing, just like when Marilyn Monroe had the Strasbergs in the corner. You know, and Marilyn would like always look over there before she said, okay. And if they made a signal, she'd say, give me a minute. He was afraid that would happen with Vivian Leigh. And there were already stories about her mental instability and so forth. But he also had a bias to which he admits that he didn't think British actors could do the natural realism that was called for in Streetcar Named Desire. And he got over that within like 3 days of shooting and really, really loved her. She needed a lot of attention, but she said she was worth every minute of it. And she and Brando never were great friends. He had great respect for her, and she had a wary respect for him, but they never connected. Their vocabularies were entirely different.
What about Kim Stanley in that triangle?
Oh, that was a tough chapter to write because she was in confessional mode and talked about how she destroyed herself, destroyed her life, her career, her children. She had one of the great talents of all time, and she just destroyed it. And she also she felt guilty about how much power she had ceded to Lee Strasberg. So she said when she did any part, it was what Lee Strasberg and her therapist wanted, and she didn't care who else was on stage with her, who the director was, who the playwright was. She would change lines, you know, it was all about her. And she was, you know.
Was she like that in Streetcar as well?
Kim Stanley was in Streetcar, Kim Hunter was in Streetcar. I thought you were asking about Kim Stanley. Oh, no, Kim Hunter was like salt of the earth, wonderful, terrific actress, who's, and we'll never know what kind of career she might have had if she hadn't been blacklisted. I mean, she was being offered really great roles and then didn't work for a decade.
For Hulac?
Yeah.
Who played the female lead on stage in Sweet Bird of Youth?
Geraldine Page. Yeah.
Oh,
She was great.
And everybody was in an uproar because she didn't get the film.
No, she got the film.
No, I thought it was.
There were two versions. One, I think she was in the original with Paul Newman.
Yeah.
There was later a version with the same Elizabeth Taylor.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
And,
on television.
I want to
yeah.
say Mark Harmon. Who played the younger man?
It was. That was in 1989.
Yeah.
That was a TV version.
I
Yeah.
saw Sweet Bird of Youth in the late 60s,
Yeah.
50s.
Yeah. At the Martin Beck.
I was absolutely amazed at how short Paul Newman was.
Well, exactly. Yeah. But Geraldine Page was like diabolically talented and smart. I mean, interviewing her was incredible. Okay. Are we running out of time?
We have time for like one more question.
You're it.
When you knew Tennessee, was he still reading? And if so, you know, what was he reading? And was money important to him at that time?
Money was very important to him, but he liked to say he had none. And of course, he was very wealthy. He read, but he didn't have the concentration to read well. So he was a nibbler, I guess you'd call him. So, but he knew like right where to go for something. He was very big on opening lines. You know, like he'd say, oh, and that's why he would buy a book. He would say, this, oh my God, I got to buy this book. Like 100 Years of Solitude has a great, you know, I have to buy this. I don't know that he ever finished it because he would get distracted and start talking or walk around with a 20-year-old for 5 days in the French Quarter. Like Eva Le Gallienne was just furious with me. She said, like, now you see, he should have been off typing up something instead of walking around with you. I'm like, well, thank you. I'm sitting right here, but that's okay. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, but no, he loved to read, and he was very supportive of playwrights. He loved Edward Albee, John Guare, and Lanford Wilson, and it was at everything they did. And he felt no competition or envy. Well, he envied their talent, but he didn't envy any opportunity that their talent gave them. So he was very sweet. Hi.
Do you think Tennessee would like your book?
I think he would, but he always editorialized. There was a tribute to Tennessee at Williamstown in 1982 that everyone, I didn't see it, but everyone says it was one of the most beautiful things that was ever done. And it was all these incredible actors from Williamstown. And the way it opened, the lights were down and you heard from all areas of the theater these lines from his plays that have now become part of our vocabulary. You know, I've always depended on the kindness of strangers, you know, nobody's anybody without love, that kind. And the lights came up and they would do scenes from the plays. And they needed to some connective tissue, so they cast Austin Pendleton as quote unquote the writer. Not as Tennessee Williams, but just the writer, like to come out and say, it's now 1947 and blah, blah, blah. Well, Tennessee was on the phone every night with Nikos, the artistic director, saying, put a blonde wig on him. I was pretty when I was that age. And it's like, wait, Tennessee, he's not playing you, but, and like, that needs to be 3 beats faster. And I finally just said, Tennessee, don't call us anymore. And then, of course, he was very complimentary about it. I think what he'd say about the book is he'd be so happy that these people showed up and said these things about him, some of which are critical, but it shows how much they loved him. But I think, like when I read it and when people write to me or come up to me, I think he'd say, did it have to be so sad? I think that's what he'd say.
One last question.
Sure.
Did he speak a lot about the relationship that he had with his mother,
Very
and
much.
his sister, and the father?
He said his mother taught him to dream, and that was vital, but his father taught him how to move and get out when you needed to, and that was really priceless. His mother had died 2 years before I met him, and he said, when I was growing up in the deep South, there was a term that I kept hearing as a child, and I didn't know what it meant. People would say, oh, I have mama bones today. And he thought, what are they talking about? And he asked someone, and he said, oh, that is when your mother has died, and you're walking down a street and you smell her perfume. You might smell Belogia. Or you're walking past an open bar and a song that she likes wafts out. Or someone looks like her and it hurts you all the way down to your bones. You miss her that much. It's called mama bones. And he says, I'm really suffering a lot from mama bones. He never talked about his sister. It was still, she was alive then. I mean, she outlived him. The only thing he said was that was entirely unnecessary. I think she was lobotomized because she had high spirits and she was not, Tennessee said if I'd wanted to be autobiographical in Glass Menagerie, I would have had Amanda lobotomize Laura. Because you're just not fitting in, so we have to.
Wasn't she raped by the father?
I've heard so many, I honestly don't know. There are lots of theories. He didn't say that to me. But. Thank you so much. I could talk all night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. I'd just like to read something very quickly. Michael Cordes says of James Grissom, few people have captured so well Tennessee's strange mixture of fear and admiration for women, his profound understanding, rare among men, of what drives them, their dominating presence in all of his work, and his miraculous ability to work the magic of their strengths and weaknesses into some of the most powerful roles in American theater. That says pretty much all there is to say about this. It's a wonderful book. For those of you watching online, you still have time to give us a call. Here's the store. We'll get a copy autographed for you. Don't forget also all of our events are archived, so you can watch anything that's been recorded here online. You can go back and see the history, including this one, which will be done tonight. I also wanted to say very quickly, I find it very interesting that when Kim Hunter made her entrance back into the movie, she was dressed as an ape in Planet of the Apes.
It was great.
In quite disguise, so that nobody really knew who
well,
she was.
And Tennessee was very much a movie buff. People always thought he was influenced by Chekhov, and he said, oh, that's bullshit. He said, by the time I'd read Chekhov, I had seen 2,000 movies. I'm more influenced by George Stevens and William Wyler than I am by. And he had a mind for trivia. He said Kim Hunter was robbed of an Oscar nomination for Planet of the Apes. So, yes.
Well, thanks
Thank
again.
you so
Thank
much.
you, folks. Thanks for coming. The books are for sale behind the counter. Jim will sign them right here.